We are in section 5.3, which is solving polynomial equations. Today is the 19th. And how many of you remember how to solve this equation? If I gave you y equals 3x squared minus 2x plus 9. What's a for sure way to solve this equation? Quadratic formula. Will factoring necessarily work? No, it just depends. Remember on what that discriminant is. Will completing the square work? Yes, but would you want to complete the square here? No, because a is 3, and when you divide everything by 3, it just gets ugly. And so, as long as you can remember how to solve a quadratic using the quadratic formula, I don't see that this lesson is going to be too difficult. We would set it equal to 0, 3x squared minus 2x plus 9, and then use the quadratic formula. So what we're going to do today, instead of having a degree of 2, we're going to have a degree of 3 and maybe even 4, and we're going to see what our solutions are. If it's a degree of 3, how many solutions should we get? 3. If it's a degree of 4, we should have 4 solutions. Okay, so to solve a polynomial equation, set it equal to 0. Break it down to a quadratic. And I'm going to put in parentheses by factoring. It will not always be by factoring, but for today's lesson we will be. And solve the quadratic Okay, so we'll start with an easy one. Example 1. It just says it just asks, what are the real or imaginary solutions? And let's say I give you this one, 2x cubed minus 5x squared equals 3x. What do we have to do first? Move the 3x. Where is it going to go? It's going to go first, second, or third? Third. Okay, so 2x cubed minus 5x squared minus 3x equals 0. Okay, what do you notice? When we're going to factor, what do you see? It has a greatest common factor of an x. So I pull out the x, and when I pull out the x, what am I left with? 2x squared minus 5x minus 3 equals 0. Well, guess what? I already have one solution. Does anybody know what one solution is? X equals 0 is one solution. How many solutions should I get? 3. Where are the other two going to come from? The quadratic. So I have 2x squared minus 5x minus 3 equals 0. Now you can see if that's factorable, and if it is, it's probably quicker than the quadratic formula. And so it doesn't matter to me, but I want you to factor that or quadratic formula, whichever one is going to work. And I'll give you a second to get the other two solutions. So some of you just figured out that you could factor. They have to multiply to -6 and add to -5. What two numbers? -6 and 1. So I have x minus 6, x plus 1 equals 0. But what do I have to remember to do? Divide by 2. And I have x minus 3, 2x plus 1 equals 0. Those are the factors. Those are not the solutions. To get the factors, I set each one equal to 0, so I get x equals 3 and x equals what? -1/2. So my three solutions are x equals 0, x equals 3, and x equals -1/2. And I should have gotten three solutions anyway. Okay, you try B by yourself. 3x to the 4th plus 12x squared equals 6x cubed. Subtract 6x cubed, so I have 3x to the 4th minus 6x cubed plus 12x squared equals 0. What is the greatest common factor? 3x squared times x squared minus 2x plus what? 4, is that right? Equals 0. Okay, well now, do you see that two of my solutions come right here with 3x squared equals 0? Divide by 3, I get x squared equals 0. Take the square root, I get x equals plus or minus 0. Two solutions there, but is there a such thing as a plus and a minus 0? No, so we would say x equals 0. And what is the multiplicity? Even though I'm not going to ask you for the multiplicity, what is the multiplicity? Of 2. Because if you look at this squared, you should be getting two answers from it. So 0 has a multiplicity of 2. There's two of my solutions. The other two are going to come from the quadratic formula. X squared minus 2x plus 4 equals 0. X equals the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. X equals 2 plus or minus the square root. Do we get a -12 in here? Over 2. Okay, -12. We know we're going to have what as part of our answer? I, because of the negative under the square root. And then we have to break down 12 into what? 4 times 3. So I know I have 2 plus or minus. I know I'm going to have an I. What's the square root of 4? 2I root 3 all over what? 2. Is that simplifiable? Okay, we don't ever touch what's under the radical, but we can, as long as we can do all of the outside numbers, this number, and this number, by the same number, we can simplify it. So what is everything divisible by? 2. So I have 1 plus or minus I root 3. And does that give me 4 solutions like I'm supposed to? There's 0 with a multiplicity of 2, so we count that twice. And then how do we get 2 solutions from here? The plus or minus. Did I make a mistake somewhere? Okay. Confused by the multiplicity. Do you understand that this x squared should produce 2 answers? And so we get a plus or a minus 0, which if it were plus or minus 2, that would be easy, +2, -2, but 0 can't be positive or negative. So technically it's just 0 and 0. Yeah, it just counts twice. So what are the solutions? The solutions, good question, would be x equals 0 and x equals 1 plus or minus I root 3. In other words, 1 plus I root 3 and 1 minus I root 3.
Hey, I'll tell you what.
What?
I got that completely square.
Okay, good. Very good.
I did.
You got it, completing the square, which is, completing the square will work every time. Okay, so C. Let's say I give you x squared minus 1 times x squared plus 4 equals 0. Is it already kind of factored for you? Can y'all look at that and see that it's factored for you? And technically, I guess you could use the quadratic formula for this one and for this one, but does anybody see a shorter way? Couldn't we say x squared minus 1 equals 0 and x squared plus 4 equals 0? Do y'all see that since it's already kind of factored for you? So I want you to get your 4 answers. We know we should have 4. I am going to solve by taking the square root. This 1 moves over by adding it. X squared equals positive 1. How do I undo squaring? Take the square root, take the square root. Anytime I take the square root, how many answers do I have? 2, a plus and a minus. Well, what is the square root of 1? So I have plus or minus what? 1. Positive 1 and negative 1. Well, then I move this 4 over by doing what to it? Subtracting it. So I get x squared equals negative 4. Take the square root. This time I'm going to have what? An I, because I have a square root of a negative. So I know I'm going to have plus or minus because I'm taking the square root. What is the square root of 4? 2. And what else do I have to pull out with the 2? I. So my 4 solutions are x equals 1, negative 1, 2i, and negative 2i. Are we on D now? Okay, I want you to do this one. X to the 5th plus 4x cubed equals 5x to the 4th minus 2x cubed. How many solutions should we get today? Okay, you end up with x equals 3 with a x equals 0 with a multiplicity of 3, x equals positive 2, and x equals positive 3 when you do this. And then the last one we want to talk about is E. X to the 4th minus 3x squared equals 4. Okay, I move the 4 over, so I end up with x to the 4th minus 3x squared minus 4 equals 0. And I have a problem because there's not a greatest common factor, and I still have to somehow get 4 solutions. Does anybody have any ideas? This is factorable. And in fact, it's factorable. Instead of using x times x, we could use x squared times x squared. Do y'all understand that? And you would still use your multiply to negative 4 and add to what? Negative 3. But because this is an x to the 4th, and I don't have a greatest common factor, I can try x squared and x squared. What 2 numbers does it give me? Negative 4 and 1, minus 4, plus 1. There's only a 1 to divide by. And then can you go from there? X squared minus 4 equals 0. X squared plus 1 equals 0. And you should be able to get your 4 solutions. X equals plus or minus 2, and x equals plus or minus I is what you get. So positive 2, negative 2, positive I, negative I. All right, your assignment is page 293, numbers 35 through 38 all, and then the problems that I'm about to put on the board.